Yeah, well, I'm watching everybody sitting down, and we're about ready to get started here. Welcome, everyone, to the Ethical Humanist Society of the Triangle. Thank you for coming today. I think you all know me. I'm Gretchen Niver. I'm a longtime member and off and on trustee, so I'm willing to be an MC once in a while. The Ethical Humanist Society of the Triangle promotes the use of reason and science in the search for and commitment to living an ethical life that benefits all humanity. We believe that personal inquiry, responsibility, and accountability are the best bases for ethical decision-making. Our weekly forums seek to broaden our understanding of ethics and human nature, and our congregational community encourages us to share diverse opinions, friendship, and camaraderie. We welcome everyone to share in our journey. I don't see any visitors today, but if anybody wants further information, just talk to the person next to you who probably knows everything. There's a visitor sign-in sheet, but we don't need any new signatures from you guys. We are a community, so we will take time to share our joys and concerns. Does anybody have any?
Testing. Yeah, something that's been going on for a while. The Science Book Club, the book for this month, the 14th, is Stiff by Mary Roach, which is a pretty irreverent treatment of a very serious subject. It's pretty wild. I'm not finished with it, but or maybe I'll post it. Write me and I can send you the EPUB and the Zoom link because it's a Zoom thing. And last month was everything, sort of sociology and anthropology and other lots of eye-opening and new ideas. So it's give me a write and I can send all of this. And I want to say Thursday or Friday, I bought the Powerball. It's $1.5 billion. And if apparently it didn't win because they're up to 1.8 now, but I would have got a new clock because we need a white clock, I can't read that. It needs to be white, with black hands. So I would, and I won $1 billion, I would have got you a new clock. So that's all right.
I have two joys. The first one being that the Cardinal Singers of Raleigh, which I've joined, has now done 2 concerts so far. 2 Thursdays ago, we were at an adult daycare center in Cary, which was interesting because it was also an early voting site. So we had to sort of wade through all that to get to our people. And in fact, there were more of us than there were in the audience that day, which is always kind of interesting. But it was a lot of fun. We did a few Halloween carols, Christmas carols rewritten with Halloween words. So in addition, those were the sing-alongs. And then last Thursday, we were at St. Michael's in Cary, Catholic church that's got a senior group that comes on Thursdays and that has just started meeting again. And we were the very first meeting. So that was pretty cool. And my other joy is that we had Fred's parents over for a middle of the day dinner yesterday, which meant that I could give his mother chocolate without her thinking I was poisoning her. She worries about chocolate in the evening, but at any rate, we had a good time and it was nice to see them. And it was nice to have a lovely dinner in the middle of the day on our porch in November.
This is a joy that I'd like to share, that I've shared with a few people. I would like to publicly acknowledge Gordon Strauss because he always makes it so that I'm not the oldest person everywhere I go. Now, Gordon, I think it was October 3rd was your birthday, who turned 83. I'm almost 82, But I really appreciate you, Gordon, for being the older man in my life because you're the oldest man I know. Oh, yeah, I don't know if this is a joy or concern. I just want everybody to know I'm pretending not to be terrified about what's going to happen after the results, any results of the upcoming election. All right, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Oh, yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for the birthday card that I got from the Ethical Society. It's great. It's nice to get a card every now and again. And also this week has just been wonderful. I realized that I have a really good circle of friends who just love me to death. I was taking my daughter to a camp on Saturday. I got up, my car wouldn't start. I just happened to text a friend. He's like, I'll come over and start your car. You don't have to call AAA. And then another person came and then they got my car together and took it to do stuff and took me to take my daughter to camp and everything. And so I felt very loved on Saturday. And so I wanted to share that. Yeah. So it pays to have people who are wonderful like you all in our lives. So thank you.
Okay, Chris.
Vera wants to share that she voted and that it was very fast and pleasant. So thank you, Vera, for voting. And I hope we all have voted by this time. And I want to say that since I'm involved in Chatham County's Democratic Party stuff, Chatham County has been in the lead initially for number of votes cast. And I think we're second in place right now in the state for percentage of votes cast. So we were very happy about that and hope that's a harbinger of good things to come.
Anyone else?
You all reminded me, I actually do have a small concern because on Tuesday I will be working the polls. And so, that's a little bit different than it used to be. Plus, it's a long day.
Do you want to borrow my gun?
Or a bulletproof vest? Oh,
If there are some events following Tuesday's election, it's because there's a shift in values that we're seeing that old folks know of and younger folks don't know of. But kids these days grow up in a circumstance often that don't promote the old-fashioned values. And so as a result, replacement values come in of corruption. And when I was a kid, I didn't have friends with autism and with gender confusion and with drugs, crack and all that. So we didn't have challenges to our value system like the kids do now and the parents do now. I know more than two families that are displaced trying to find good autism living circumstance for their kids. So it's difficult. It's a different time, and we should probably understand that different values are present that we don't understand. So that if there's the Trumpies raising hell and causing trouble for our democracy, there's a reason for it, and it's evolved slowly, so it's kind of hard to see. But there are answers, and they're not very pleasant ones, unfortunately. So the younger people now have to fight hard to try and clean up our act about, especially about drugs and autism. We don't know yet.
thank you, Gordon. All right, next up is Jay with our open and closing or open words to start.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm thinking that when Amy talks about consensus as her topic for today, it's going to be mostly a positive, uplifting thing. So in my typical approach, I went looking for some differing views on consensus. And I discovered that I remember her, but didn't know as much as I thought I did about Margaret Thatcher. She would fit right into some of the political climates that we have here in America. And Margaret Thatcher said this about consensus: if you set out to be liked, you would be prepared to compromise on anything at any time, and you would achieve nothing. She also said, there are still people in my party who believe in consensus politics. I regard them as quislings, as traitors. I mean it. She also said about consensus, nothing is more obstinate than a fashionable consensus. The Israeli statesman Abba Eban said this: a consensus means that everyone agrees to say collectively what no one believes individually. I thought that was interesting. Author Michael Crichton, and I'll have some more from him afterward. Author Michael Crichton said, historically, the claim of consensus has been the first refuge of scoundrels. It is a way to avoid debate by claiming that the matter is already settled. And finally, one a little more upbeat. This is by P.J. O'Rourke. The two most frightening words in Washington are bipartisan consensus. Bipartisan consensus is when my doctor and my lawyer agree with my wife that I need help.
So for today's speaker, we have our very own Amy to come and speak to us. There's not much I can say other than she's been coming to our society since 1994 and has always contributed a lot to us and ran the cooking at the shelter for many, many years. So she's been very involved in our society's programs. And I'm sure she'll have a lot to discuss with us on consensus. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Gretchen. Now, I need to get my machine going again. Okay, so let's talk about consensus decision making. So what is consensus and how might it be relevant to ethical culture? Yes, yes, I'm seeing the same thing as you are. Well, so it's a way of making decisions that creates a high level of commitment to the final decision, to the final outcome. It reduces disgruntlement and withdrawal of group members, and it increases group cohesion, making future discussions and decisions more productive. Consensus is one of multiple ways of making a decision. You can have a unilateral decision where one person, the boss usually, makes a decision and everyone ends up going along with it. You can have a clique decision where there's the boss and one other person, and they agree to proceed with a decision. And you may or may not get some good commitment from the other members of the group. Majority rule is what we're all familiar with. We have that as one of our commitments to use the democratic process, and usually that means that we're voting or coming to some kind of agreement by a majority vote. And then there's consensus, and that is where every member of the group knows that what they think and value is considered by everyone. And Each person agrees that even under circumstances which may not be ideal, the decision is fair and workable, and it is one that they can work with and support. And I have a very short YouTube video here. Oh, how do I back up? I had a very, here we go. Let's go back to this one. I hope I can get this YouTube video to go. If not, then we're out of luck. I guess not. Well, that's a short one. So it's only about 2 minutes long. I was hoping to share that with you. So I was not familiar with consensus decision-making until I joined Arcadia, which is an intentional community in Carborough. They are part of a federation of intentional communities. And so here are some of their thoughts. We value working together to make decisions while tending relationships. So the relationship part is just as important as the decision you come to. Everyone is taken into account and their input is listened to, and they remember the Quaker adage, everyone has a piece of the truth. We are obligated to understand each other to find the best solution for the group and for the project. And we reference and prioritize our mission and our purpose. Now, making a consensus decision needs 4 ingredients: a group of people willing to work together. Now, we aren't seeing that in our politics so much these days, which is maybe why Margaret Thatcher's ideas on consensus are a little dicey. We need a problem or an issue that requires a decision by the group. We trust that there's a decision, and we have a willingness to persevere in finding the best solution. And in '95, as our Arcadia community was forming, they came up with this statement that it is important for us to come together with the intention to speak and act in good faith and wanting the best for the community. It is okay to disagree, to have strongly felt principles and opinions, and learning to live with our conflicts is important to the growth of our community. And I think when our ethical society has had issues come before it, we have tried sometimes to live by these ideas. It hasn't always worked. So we have, in Arcadia, we've decided to, after some training in consensus building, we adopted the 6-step process: the initial presentation, questions that clear the air, a discussion, we generate a proposal, we come to a decision, and we have implementation details. And I am now going to give you an example that was for which we use this 6-step process. So we started with a group of us wanted to make having community meals easier. We had always valued having community meals in our dining room. We have a community dining room, and the purpose of that is so that we can be together as a group. And the problem with was arising that nobody wanted to sign up. We all wanted community meals. Nobody wanted to volunteer to clean up. And it's not too bad if you only have 6 people, but if 20 people or 30 people sign up, we need help. So let me, oh, I didn't want to do that. So what we did was to bring the issue to the community, and the community did agree that, yes, we'd like to proceed on exploring the different options we might have for resolving this problem that we have. So yes, it was really a problem. The problem was that some cooks would cancel their their planned meals with short notice because nobody signed up to clean and they didn't want to do all the marketing, all the cooking, the preparations, serving, and the cleanup. That really wasn't fair. Some people would stopped volunteering because they were the only people signing up over and over again, and the rest of the community would just walk away and not make sure that things were being done to help them. And they were feeling they were stuck with more than they'd planned to do. And there were some objections to having a residential dishwasher. In some people's experience, the residential dishwasher was noisy and very using too much water and electricity. And then they also wondered, why can't we continue using the system that we have now? So after some of that discussion, we did some brainstorming and we came up with some solutions, which you probably see up there. And you can't read that. It's too small. Is that helpful? How's that? Okay, good. So if we brainstormed and thought, well, we could hire cleaners. We could install a residential dishwasher. We could forego community meals. We could use disposable plates and napkins, and silverware. Everyone could bring their own tableware. Well, we tried that. We had been doing that for a while. We could call for cleaners at mealtime. That's kind of fraught with, like, is anybody really going to do it? And we could order takeout food. So what did we decide to do then? Moving right along. There we go. Can you read that one? I expanded it a little bit. So in the vetting, after the brainstorming, we vetted these possibilities, and we wanted to know, is each solution in line with our mission and our principles? And those are to encourage social engagement and conservation and consider the environmental impacts. Was it affordable? Is it realistic? And will the solution be too noisy, meaning a residential dishwasher? And then also with the consideration of a residential dishwasher, do we have the infrastructure? Is there plumbing and the drain and the electricity available? So we prioritize some the solutions. And you can see those. We've already talked about those. So we generated a solution, a proposal, and that was to install a home dishwasher in our community kitchen, which is adjacent to the dining room. We thought it would be best to try to choose a dishwasher that has a high rating with Consumer Reports, and the criteria were for efficiency, low noise, for the capacity, and for durability. And we set a budget of up to $2,000. And then we went through the issues with the other possibilities, bringing our own tableware. We had already invested in plates, silverware, and everything for setting tables. And we had already determined that using those over and over was more environmentally consistent with our principles than other methods. We decided not to call for cleaners at the beginning of the meal because who knows if that would be successful. And then we'd either have dirty dishes sitting around or somebody would feel imposed upon. We had hired help in the past for some events, and that was really more miss than hit. We were planning on people showing up and they didn't, so we had to get volunteers from the community who were wanting to play instead of clean up. And the disposables were determined to be, again, not environmentally in line with our principles of having low impact. And our current dishwashing system is a commercial sanitizer. So first you have to wash and rinse the dishes first, put them in the racks, run it through the sanitizer, have the water hot enough so that the dishes dry, or somebody has to dry them, or they air dry. And that machine uses a lot of water and is quite noisy. So the people who are operating it are actually causing disturbance to the people in the dining room who want to have a conversation. So we decided on a quiet residential dishwasher, finally. And that was our consensus decision. We decided to put in a residential dishwasher in our common house kitchen. And the next part is that our community at the plenary meeting, where a consensus decision was adopted, the community makes this affirmation and affirms this question: are you in agreement that this decision is in the best interests of Arcadia, even though it may not be in your personal best interest? And people agreed to that. Yay. And then we had a plan for implementation. One of our residents, Reed, whose father is an electrician, agreed to acquire the dishwasher and all the necessary parts to get it installed and to install it. So here's the October of 2016. So the dishwasher is now 4 years going on. It's 6. Well, it's not quite, because it wasn't installed until January. Because to get everything arranged. But it actually was done for less than $2,000, and the money came from our capital funds. And here it is. So the before is over here. You can see the commercial in the far corner there. You can see the commercial sanitizer system, and in the island, the center island tables is where we did put the dishwasher, and there it is. Well, obviously I haven't done this a lot before in the past, so sorry, y'all. Just so, can you read that? Oh, shoot. I don't know. This is not here. So I'll read it to you. Consensus decision-making is a process, and it might take more than one meeting. The participation is important, especially if you have questions or doubts. Everyone has a right to be heard and understood, which means somebody might have to present their idea in more than one way at more than one time. We have consensus decisions that are consistent with our values and our mission, and working together to find the best solution for the group and for the project enhances the cohesion and trust in our community. And how is consensus relevant to our ethical humanist society? So we can encourage and value everyone's participation. This takes an effort and time. It really is worth it. We can't do this. We can't do this kind of thing on Zoom. Oh, is that my time? Time's up. We create decisions that are consistent with our purpose and mission. We can create decisions without disgruntlement and withdrawal, and we've certainly experienced that in some trying to deal with some issues in the past. We hope that these decisions will increase commitment and participation and lead to a more cohesive group dynamic. And at the end of our decisions, these steps are clear for implementation. And that's it. So we can continue. Thank you for your attention.
We'll do our question and answer in a couple minutes. But we're an all-volunteer organization, and so we depend on our members to help get us through, and I'll pass the baskets for those who want to make a donation. If anybody would like to have some questions or comments for Amy, now would be the time. And I'll pass the microphone around.
Amy. Oh, okay. How many households share your kitchen?
There are 33 households in the community. We range from a 5-bedroom house to a 1-bedroom. So there's opportunities for many different living arrangements. But yeah, 33.
So people travel down the street or whatever to get to the kitchen every
It's-
day for
yes, it's
dinner?
centrally located.
Thank you.
Two questions. One is with 33 households, does each household get one vote? Or if there's a household with 5 people, are there 5 votes?
Well, we don't do that. We have one vote per household. Yeah.
Okay. And then,
Well, it's not a vote. It's one consensus.
okay.
Yeah.
And a couple of things that I didn't see in the presentation are blocking consensus, to explain what that means, and then standing aside on consensus. Can you go into that briefly, or?
Yes. In general, we try not to have a situation where someone wants or feels they need to block. We may do a straw poll in advance of making the decision and deal with any objections before it gets to the point of blocking the decision time. So by the time we get to come to the meeting where we actually adopt a decision by consensus, we've already dealt with all the objections.
That was going to be my question. So you have been able to make the consensus model work in every case virtually?
Yes, oftentimes when there's a really contentious proposal or idea, we may decide not to deal with it, that now is not the time to deal with that issue. And if somebody really pushes it and wants to shepherd it through all of the steps, they take that on. But sometimes the community simply decides we just can't deal with it.
Have you ever fallen back to take a vote as a last resort or never?
Not since I've been there.
Okay.
So, and I've lived in the community since 2005, but
That's-
no, we haven't done that. We
that's
do the
impressive.
straw poll in advance of
Okay.
coming to a decision.
Thank you.
Well, this is going to sound like a naive question, but I spent 3 years of my life in my 20s in communal societies. And although I wasn't a member and didn't have a vote, I always did my share of either volunteering or working the rotational. And I have trouble understanding why people would want to or agree to participate in a communal dinner, but you can't get volunteers to clean up. I did, you know, so why does that happen?
Some people are just too busy and not committed to the community, or they might be in a time in their life where they're not interested in the, or they're too busy to deal with community events. But I don't know. I'm one of the people who likes to cook, but I don't want to do all the cleanup. So I'm not one who has canceled a meal at the last minute. We always managed to somehow to get somebody to clean up, but it was always has been a little fraught getting the cleanup done. So
What percentage of people do you get to participate in an average? If you're doing a community meal, does everybody always come? Or
no, everyone does not always come because, you know, people have other events, other things to do of an evening or on the weekends. So it could be 10%, it could be 10 people, it could be 6 people. Well, I think the last time Paul and I did a community meal, it was 6 people. But we knew that in advance because we asked that people to sign up. And then the next event was 30 people for a brunch. So it depends on the day, depends on a variety of reasons.
Gretchen just stole my question. But actually, your response gave me a follow-up question. What sort of lead time do you have? I mean, like if you say, I want to do this dinner, how many days advance do people have to let you know? I don't really understand quite how that works.
Oh, well, so Google has made it really easy now for us to have a sign-up sheet. So we can put out, my husband and I, when we cook, try to think like 3 or 4 days, at least 3 or 4 days in advance, and usually a week. So we'll put out the Google document sign-up sheet and say, well, it's going to be we're going to do a brunch on Sunday morning, and we need to do our shopping, of course, on Saturday so we can get good things from the farmer's market. And so we need to know by Friday night or early Saturday morning who's going to be there and how many people to shop for.
Well, if you get a consensus, that's obviously a good way to get a decision because you have buy-in from all the people. But obviously, not everybody's going to agree that a particular solution is the best solution. So in the end, really, you're exerting social pressure on those who disagree and forcing, in the end, they have to say, okay, I'll go along with it. I mean, I remember reading about Indian tribes who made decisions by talking to consensus. And sometimes on a big decision, they would have to talk all night. And I guess if you have time pressure that you have to come to a decision, then there's enough pressure that everybody will, in the end, concede and say, okay, I'll go along with the decision. But it's not going to always work.
Well, so it depends. So consensus decisions are easier when there's a small group. It still takes time you can't, you may put a time limit on it and say, if we need to come to a decision in 2 hours. Well, then the pressure is on people who have objections to make their objections known and to be open to some modification of their ideas so that everybody can agree. And if you can't do that, well, you may not have a consensus. You may have to, like I said before, you may have to table that idea, table that decision until you can discuss it again more fully, or until sometimes you just need more information in order to make a final decision.
Yeah, yeah. And as a student, I lived in a big house on Macaulay Street with a bunch of students, and every Sunday we'd have a dinner, and I always washed the dishes because you would not want to eat anything I ever cooked anyway. So that's, and some people like to cook. So you can rotate through, like being point man in the army. It doesn't matter if you want to be it or not, you just rotate through. But a problem, as you said, with consensus, my dad tells me, he's from Poland, the Polish legislature was consensus with noblemen, and they were deciding to make up defenses in the East against Russia, of course. And the Russians they got some noblemen drunk and paid them to say, I'm against it and I'm a nobleman. And of course they chased after him and would have killed him if they got him. But that stopped all the plans. So there are difficulties with consensus because you may never get a consensus. Yeah.
Well, the book you mentioned, The Dawn of Everything, has a long section on the First Peoples in the Americas using the consensus method. Now, they didn't have everyone in the tribe involved in that. So it didn't involve everyone making the decision. They were designated representatives. So it was a representative consensus making process. That's my recall anyway.
Yeah, so I think the point that Stan made and Mike was making, that you might have some disgruntled people as a result of the process. I looked up a bit ago the Chinese People's Congress, which took place recently in Beijing, and they had 2,300 delegates. But in the end, it was unanimous that completely 100% unanimous, that would be a consensus.
All for Xi.
That Xi Jinping was elected as the new leader. And so you've got to think that maybe a few of those people were a little disgruntled.
They don't dare to say so. And the one person the man who preceded Xi was ushered out.
Hu Jintao. Yeah.
Before that. So yeah.
Yeah. So consensus can mean different things at different times to different people.
It can. And I gave you the example of what's happening in my community. It does take practice and training. We've had trainers come in, and some of our members have gone to more formal consensus facilitation programs. So it's a commitment to have that kind of decision-making process in a community.
It's my understanding that ideal consensus is not compromise, that it is the result of what you're talking about, raising objections and having those objections met, maybe a little give and take, but it's supposed to result in everyone being relatively content and agreeable with the decision. Is that come through with what you've learned about consensus?
Yeah. If a household in our neighborhood is willing to block then there is a lot of social pressure on getting them into the process and getting their issues resolved. And sometimes they simply can't do it. And then they don't participate in some parts of the community. And some people have left because they couldn't get their way.
I have so many questions about this. The first one is, how do you divvy up the money for meals? Or how do you handle the cost of the meals?
Oh, well, the cooks just announce when they have the sign up sheet posted, how much the meal will cost. We try to keep it, it was back in the day in like 2005, meals were around $3. They've crept up into the $5 and $10 range now. But that's still affordable for a meal out. You can't do that in a restaurant. And and we try to accommodate people's different dietary needs like gluten-free and no eggs and all other kinds of issues that people have.
Wow. So are there designated houses? Sorry, I know I'm asking two questions. Are there designated houses in your, I want to call it a co-op, but
it's an intentional community. Yeah. Co-housing.
So when somebody leaves, then they have to find a buyer who wants to buy into this intentional housing group, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And the triangle actually has the highest number of co-housing communities anywhere in the country.
Wow.
There are 2 in Carrboro, probably 4 or 5 in Durham, and others are scattered around Orange County. I don't think there's one in Chatham County, but out of Durham County, Person County, I think has one. So there are quite a few around.
And what drew you and Paul to an intentional community?
We had done Paul was always interested in community building. And so when we lived in St. Louis, he had a business of rehabilitating historic buildings. And so we did 38 buildings. A lot of it got rehab. And that was revitalizing the inner city. So that's always been kind of a part of our life together, is doing that sort of thing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very quick question,
Good.
kind of a, don't take it the wrong way. Who empties the dishwasher?
I'm sorry?
Who empties the dishwasher?
Ah.
Because now you have this machine that has washed the dishes,
Indeed.
and then who is now responsible for replacing these items? Because then it falls back on the cook. Just speaking from a mom perspective.
That's oftentimes it's once in a while it's a little ad hoc. I'm the kitchen fairy. So if the person who signed up to clean up they try to get back to empty the dishwasher the next day, if it's an evening meal, or later in the day if it's a brunch. And so somehow it magically happens. Once in a while I do it, but I'm okay with that as long as I don't have to do it all the time.
Hello, I'm going to get us back to consensus.
Thank you.
Given the amount of time that consensus can take, and I understand at the very baseline of what you described, that you come together to that everyone involved actually wants to solve the problem, not sabotage it.
That's right. That's one of the 4 requirements.
So what happens for emergencies, things that actually have to be done, but must be done fairly quickly?
Well, that doesn't fall into the consensus model. so we have work groups or work circles. One's for community life, which is the social aspects of our community. One is common area, the pavement, the sidewalks, the communally owned parts of the property. One is the administrative group. And so if there is an emergency, admin gets to deal with it. Okay, does that answer the question? Okay.
When you have a new household moving in, is that also a consensus decision?
No, but we do request that sellers make it clear to the buyers, the community that they're buying into. And we, when people are considering buying a house, they are invited to attend an HOA meeting if one's coming up. And we just had a big Halloween party and groundbreaking celebration at this as part of that. And people who were looking at one of the houses that's for sale came to that event to see the kind of community they might be buying into. So we had 30 kids for trick-or-treating on Halloween last Sunday, which is why I wasn't on Zoom last week.
Hey, Amy.
Hey, oh,
Over
Mary,
here.
okay.
So one thing you mentioned that made something more suitable for consensus decision-making was a smaller group. What are some of the other parameters that make it more likely a situation where consensus would work well?
Well, like 30 people, 30 households is a pretty big group for consensus. It, you know, if you're going to be doing a lot of things on consensus, maybe a smaller group is better. But it can't, but like one of the YouTube videos recommends it for people, for engineers, a group of engineers. Each one of them has special knowledge of a certain part of the project. They all need to get together, share that information, and agree on a solution so their project can move forward. So, you know, it might be 6 people or 10 people that is working on a project like that. So there are different aspects of consensus decision-making that work better for some larger groups and not so well, but like the US Congress can't do consensus. It's too big a group. It's too big a group, but the each committee that, you know, and each congressman is on a number of committees. I think those groups often use a consensus decision-making rather than a straight majority vote. Sometimes they have to do a majority vote, but they try to do consensus for a lot of things. And I was just thinking as I was dreaming this up, that the process of writing the US Constitution, a lot of that, you know, the history of making that agreement had to involve a lot of consensus, a lot of presenting your ideas, and maybe they weren't all, obviously, they weren't all accepted. Some people refused to sign certain parts of, or maybe that was the Declaration of Independence. No, I can't remember that document. Which one it was, where some members of the group refused to sign. And I think that was the Declaration of Independence. They were in agreement that they needed to present this to the king, but not everybody wanted to sign it.
I've got a question from Todd Bishop. The question was hinted at earlier, but I'll ask this more directly. When someone new wants to move in, and you know they've come to one of the community meet and greet kind of thing, does the community vote on whether or not to let them in, or is it only a decision between the seller and the buyer?
In our community, it's between the seller and buyer.
Okay.
that has worked so far. But there are, I have been aware of communities where the entire HOA or a community organization invites or allows people to come in, so they have a thumbs up or thumbs down. Like some co-ops in New York City have that structure. We don't do that. We want families with children in our neighborhood, so we try to encourage, make it more possible for the children, for families with children to come in rather than have 25 families that are 90 and older or 50 and older. Yeah.
And I've got one question that Chris is going to ask. You said that 33 or 30 is a fairly large group to have for consensus. So does that mean that, for example, with our society here, that consensus is sort of ruled out because there's too many people involved?
I don't think so. It just takes a little longer.
Okay.
And, you need a little more organization. You need someone who's a good facilitator to get everybody involved and included. Okay. It's not impossible. It just takes it takes more time and more commitment.
Okay, thanks.
That's why I think it's okay. Like when, a few years ago, we had a proposal, and now I don't remember exactly what it was. It was about supporting Israel in some way. And we lost some valued members because we didn't meet, we didn't take that offline, meet and discuss it in person and have maybe some facilitation or some path forward rather than people getting angry with each other online. Okay, so I would have, I think that might have been a good way to deal with that issue.
I was going to ask a question, but I think you kind of answered it, but I'll make a statement instead. When I was in grad school, one of the most depressing a day of class, the professor was talking about the federal government, and somebody would bring a bill, or two congressmen from different parties would bring a bill, and it would have all these things attached to it. And of course, those guys wanted everything, or I shouldn't say guys, but those people all wanted every point to be accepted. The trouble was, my professor was saying, was that if you hold off and demand that everything be accepted, the likelihood is that thing won't even be passed. The other side of that coin was to make the compromise and just get through what you could, hoping that at a later date, you could introduce those other things again. And my professor said, if you do that, those things will never be brought up again. So it was a very depressing day for me. It's a hard pill to swallow to say, do I compromise and lose some things that I think are extremely important? Do I put my foot down with the chance of it never being passed? So my question was going to be, do you think Congress could do it? But you've already answered that because it's too big of a group. So thank you for your insight.
I got two questions. How often is it ever the case that all 30 communities take part in a consensus decision? Or is it always generally a smaller group?
Everyone has the opportunity to participate, and you can offer a proxy with another community member. So, and if you decide not to participate, you're not required to do that. Then you are acquiescing to the decision of the community.
Understand, okay.
Yeah.
And typically, how many generally choose to participate?
when it's an important decision, like I don't think we had more than 15 people on this dishwasher decision. It just wasn't that important to some people. But recently we did increase the number of parking spaces in the community, and that really got some people agitated, exercised. So there were a lot of negatives and a lot of positives going head to head on that. So we did end up coming to consensus on that, and most everybody participated in that one.
One last question. How is a facilitator picked for a particular issue?
Well, now it depends. Again, it depends. If the issue is a big one, like the parking, expanding our parking, we brought in an outside facilitator because there were people, with pretty dug in ideas on both sides of the question. And so the outside facilitator was able to get us moving and keep us moving in the direction of a decision on that one.
Okay.
I'm just thinking about an issue that you referred to here. And I understand your points about taking the time, and everybody needs to be notified and included. And I agree with that. I also think that there are times when people, if they don't get their own way, are going to quit the organization, whether you had a consensus building or not. And I don't think it's a tragedy. I think it's recognizing that the community or organization they're in isn't the one that fits with their values and the way they want to do things. And that's okay too, to recognize that. I don't see it as a tragedy. I see it as progress.
Well, sometimes you simply have to let people go. If they're, nothing you do is satisfactory. Well, yeah, people need to go where they're happy. Yeah. But
So-
we've tried. The issue is to attempt to make them so that they feel heard and understood.
In any group, sooner or later, I would imagine there would be an issue and a person or small group of persons who are going to say, no, this is just not something I can support. And is there, when you said you had some training, and I mean, you had some folks come in to help you build this model of decision-making, is there the possibility of a split decision? And if so, would it be majority rules, or how would it work? What happens then if there's like just no consensus?
Well, let's take the issue of expanding the parking. Oh, so take the example of expanding the parking spaces. One possibility was to have, so we have our roadway. All of the parking could have been on the north side of that roadway, and we could have put in 15 parking spaces. There were people who said that takes out too many trees. It makes, too many cars in one row. And so what we do, we may have reduced the number of parking spaces that we decided to increase. We put in some buffers, trees and plants to buffer sections of the parking. And does that get close to your question?
Well, I mean, I guess I was sort of asking if it's just really fancy. Is that a possibility?
Well, then you have someone who's willing to block. And I can tell you in our community, that is there is a lot of negative association with that kind of behavior. So people try not to do that as best they can. I mean, we try to get around doing that. So we might have some private meetings with the person who has the big objections, with another person who's a good facilitator, who is willing to go one-on-one with them and, find out what would it take? What would it take to get you happy with this?
So something you mentioned in one of your answers brought up this question, because when I first moved to Durham, which was 15, I was invited to join the board of the Jewish Community Relations Council, JCRC. And I said, I don't think I would be a good person to have on it because I have some rather controversial opinions about Israel. And this is a Jewish group, so I kind of know what's going to happen. And I was told, no, don't worry. We agreed that Israel is off the table because there is already quite a bit of differences of opinion. So I joined. And a short time later, a new person joined who insisted that Israel does have to be part of the agenda. And as a result, I left. I'm really curious. Was there already a history of taking political action? Why one of your member households would bring up support of Israel? In what context was that? Because I'm just baffled.
Oh, I'm sorry. This was not in that was here. That was an issue.
Okay. All right, then you don't need to explain because I remember. Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't talking about Arcadia at that time.
I think there's lots of ways of dealing with these kinds of discussions, and one of the workshops I've been to, I've forgotten what they called it now, but it's essentially a third way, where one side puts down all its wants and the other side puts down its wants, and then objections and stuff. And often objections have reasons behind them that aren't what's explicitly being said. So that if you can work well with a facilitator or with these methods, you can come to this third way, which doesn't offend anybody, but actually works to get to a decision that everybody can live with and live with without resentment.
Without rancor. Yeah. And so there's another descriptor for that, which is collaborative, creative collaboration, where what you get is something in the middle. So consensus is not the only way to get to an acceptable decision. This is one way. Okay. Anything else? I'm getting a cramp in my foot, so.
How expensive was it to bring in an outside facilitator?
I wasn't part of that decision, so I don't know. I suspect it was around, it was probably between $300 and $500.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Amy. Do we have any announcements? Mike?
So after last week's Zoom meeting, so I went to join the Long Island because they were the biggest and most famous, and their facilitator was very articulate and well-spoken. But he said something that they're going to have a big Zoom like that every 5th Sunday. Have you heard about that? That would be neat. That's something we're going to have a Zoom every 5th Sunday. We could join. Any interest in joining everybody like the last one?
Thanks the board.
Pardon?
The board has not committed to do every one of a 5th Sunday thing, but we are regularly interested in joining in with the AU and having all society wide. So I don't know that that's going to be every fifth Sunday. They have to schedule that based on the availability of societies and speakers and all that.
Well, he said we're going to have all society meetings on fifth Sunday. So that sounded good.
That's what happened, but he probably doesn't work on that.
Okay, that was a great idea.
Our announcement for next Sunday's meeting, we are again on Zoom. Do not come here. And we have, of course, just gotten this incredibly interesting, I thought, presentation on consensus. Thank you, Fred. My brain went blank. So instead, next Sunday, we're going to be discussing the results of an alternative way of making decisions. We will be having a group discussion about the election. So it should be very interesting. Please tune in with us.
And this is Chris. We kicked off our pledge campaign back when we had our fall meeting, but I haven't sent anything out officially about the pledge campaign. So I promise after Tuesday, the 8th, I will get on that and we'll send some kind of communication out and give you the chance to make whatever pledges you feel like you can make for 2023. So that's coming down the pike. And thanks to all of you who support us by making pledges and putting money in the basket.
Just a reminder that coming up on this Tuesday is the IFC's annual fundraiser with the restaurants in the area. And I put a listing up on the table at the front. 20%, I believe, of the sales or whatever for the day will go to the IFC. There's a couple restaurants, or you can buy a gift card. If you buy a gift card on that day, 20% of that goes to the restaurants. And a couple of them are closed Tuesdays and will honor the day on Wednesday. One of those, I think, is well, La Residence will give 20% for cards purchased between the 5th and the 8th. But there's a nice long list, and if anybody's interested in getting the group together to go Tuesday, I'm happy to take names and try and organize a group.
Any other announcements?
Next Sunday, I've mentioned this before, there's a group that meets the second Sunday of every month. They meet in the mornings at 10:30, so it wouldn't compete with this group's, but their topic next week is going to be creating communities of care for queer and trans POC. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, they're called Sunday Assembling. They have a meetup page too.
Thank you, Blue.
Just a quick plug for the Change for Change with Stronger Together. It's an all-girl, well, it's men can come too, but it's an all-girls organization to promote, empowerment in young girls. And they are looking for volunteers. So if you have this burning desire to take preteen and teenage girls out on excursions of any kind, they have gone kayaking, they've gone camping, they've done all kind of great stuff. They are looking for volunteers as well, or drivers to drop people off. So just wanted to put a plug in for them.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, now we have our closing words by Jay.
A couple of final comments about this very interesting topic of consensus, which I found a lot more interesting than I expected, to be honest. It was great. And this is more from Michael Crichton, and this is not quite as cryptic, and this will be appreciated by the scientists who are in our midst. Says Crichton, quote, "I would remind you to notice where the claim of consensus is involved. Consensus is invoked only in situations where the science is not solid enough. Nobody says the consensus of scientists agrees that E equals mc squared. Nobody says the consensus is that the sun is 93 million miles away. It would never occur to anyone to speak like that. There is no such thing as consensus science. If it's consensus, it isn't science. If it's science, it isn't consensus, period. And finally, from that noted atheist, Daniel Dennett, quote, "The problem is that no ethical system has ever achieved consensus. Ethical systems are completely unlike mathematics or science. This is a source of concern." Thank you.
I like it. All right, I'd like to thank Mary, who was our greeter today, and Dorothy for our lovely refreshments, and Jay for opening and closing words, and Mike for putting the signs out as usual. And thank myself for being MC. And our meeting is over, but our fellowship continues. Please say hello to the person next to you and enjoy our fine refreshments. Thank you.